companies, being able to communicate is really, really important, okay? And as scientists, we have a really important role to play because science is involved in almost all our global challenges, whether it's environment, whether it's cancer, whether it's food, whatever you hear about. And yet people at large, the general public, is a little bit, shall we say, hesitant about understanding science, because soon as scientists, it's too difficult, we don't know what you're talking about. And so it's our role to be able to communicate what we are doing in a way that people are able to understand, because that's part of what we are doing and it's part of how we do challenges. So that's why Train the Trainers is about, one, reaching the future community and building our networks and building capacity. So if you are the leaders, we would like you then to be able to expand our base. And two, in order to do that well, it's really important not just to know the science and to communicate well. So this is why this morning we thought that for starting the session of the Train the Trainers, we would actually have Antonella Del Rosso talk about how do you communicate in science. And we are very, very fortunate because actually Pablo said yesterday, he felt old when his CV was being read out. You know something, I feel really old because most of the people who are speaking, I knew them when they were really young. So I know I'm old. Not only do I know all the people, but they're all now having senior positions. So Antonella is a physicist by training. I've known her a long time. She's been involved in science communication at CERN for more than 20 years. And she was the editor of CERN Korea and the CERN Bulletin, responsible for many activities, including internal communication, communication of the CERN alumni project. Since 2012, she's been doing the Italian Teachers Program. One of the things I liked when she was doing this was this project called CERNland, where she was doing it for the children. It's like, I always thought of it as Legoland, or one of those Gardaland. When I go to Venice from here and you drive, there's this Gardaland, and when she's talking about CERNland, that's what I thought of. But anyway, I digress. So she's currently working on the CERN exhibits, is responsible for the content of Microcosm, Globe, CERN visit itineraries, traveling exhibitions. And she's my go-to person when I need help in any sort of communication and content. So who better to tell us about communicating science? So welcome, Antonella. We are all ears. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Manjita. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me. And well, congratulations to all the participants, because this is a very high level training course and I'm really honored to be here. So thank you very much. Yeah, we're going to talk about communication, actually science communication. I have a very short presentation to share with you, and then the idea is that we just talk about it and we discuss the points that raise an interest in your personal perception of what I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to share my very short presentation. Okay. So first of all, science plus communication gives science, actually. This is to say that there is no science without communication. It's an important point that we're going to discuss even further during my presentation and then with your questions and answers. So communicating is part of the duty of a scientist. So what is your public then? So basically you're communicating to whom, with whom? So that's the big question. Well, of course, you're communicating to your peers. And an important point of this is that you really should consider peers also members of the public in terms of how you should talk to them. And also, the more you specialize about something, the more actually the less people are likely to really understand what you're saying. So this at some point will become an issue in communication and not just in the content that you have to share. So consider everyone, each single person, a member of your public, and therefore do an effort to communicate with them, just not assume that they understand, okay? And then of course, journalists are also your public, because we have seen with the pandemic, but we will see this increasingly in the coming years, you know, the climate change crisis and all the things that are related to science. The journalists need your input. The journalists will look for you. They will search the scientists who communicates well, because they need it. They do not generally have a scientific background, and they need your input. And they will, as I said, search for the one who can communicate well what he's doing or she is doing. So journalists, and then of course the general public, because this is also true. More and more scientists are called to talk and speak directly to the general public, to members of the general public, which means also teachers and students and, you know, really the general public. And Manjit knows this very well. She is a very good science communicator. And this is why, you know, Manjit speaks also Italian. And for our Italian training course for teachers, well, we actually asked her to give a lecture, and even if the Italian is almost perfect, but it's not. It doesn't sound really. It sounds Italian spoken by an English native speaker. It's very nice, but you know, the content, the way she delivers the content, is just so impactful that you just want to have Manjit on stage. So this kind of example shows you that you can be a very good scientist and a very good science communicator. Right. So what are your outlets? Of course, you will have to give presentations in the course of your career, that's for sure. Presentations, you have to write articles, and you might be called to do videos, in particular, you know, participate also, or communicate what you do in your social media or in the social media of, for example, your institution. So these are all very common outlets, and in each one of these outlets, you have to make the effort of communicating. So don't consider, for example, you know, a technical presentation as, let's make the example of a technical presentation for your peers. So you might be tempted to say, okay, this is for peers and it's a standard presentation, so I do not need to make any effort. That is never true. You always have to try your best to communicate really what you want to say in the best possible way. And this is true also for your articles. And again, the temptation is to say, okay, that's a scientific article. I do not need to make any efforts. I will just do what I'm used to do and go for that. This is also wrong, because you will always, the more you do this, the smaller your public will be. So of course there will always be someone who understands what you're saying, but it will be a very small ensemble of people, and that you don't want it. You want to tell to the largest ensemble of people what you want to share. Okay, so we have a must-do list. So you have to, you personally have to engage with your public. So you have to consider important to engage with your public. And again, the public can be several types of public, but always your attitude needs to be engaging. Like, I want to talk with you. I want to tell you things. And it's important to me to tell you these things. So the next thing is use your empathy. You have it. Anyone does. So use your empathy, because you have to understand whether your public is receiving your message. Don't let anyone lose contact with you. The eye contact, I know that, for example, here in Zoom is completely, it's a challenge. It's very difficult because you do not have the, the proximity. You do not see people really. You see the video. That's not the same thing. So in Zoom, this is very challenging. So, for example, you being my audience now, you need to be very motivated to follow what I'm saying. So I have really little means to say, okay, stay with me, don't lose me, don't let me go, follow me. But that's, again, very difficult. In person, in a room, that's much easier. Anyway, use your empathy to understand whether the public is following you. If not, do something. Start moving something. Catch their attention. Call them to follow you. Do something. The moment you realize that, take action. Don't let it go. And of course, you need to share the right content. This is usually not a very huge problem for the scientists. The scientists, they usually know what they want to say, but still, sharing the right content means to share what is relevant to the public. So you have to share the right content for the right public. And you remember, it can be a different type of public. So don't share the same content that you would share with a peer, with the general public. That doesn't work. So that seems obvious, but actually scientists also feel the temptation, I would call it this way, to share as much as they know to everyone, with everyone. That doesn't work. So just select what you want to say and adapt this to the public, and use only what you think is going to work with that specific public. Okay, you should also avoid sharing awful slides. That's a must, really. So that's not a detail. If you put up awful slides, immediately the public, whatever the public is again, will understand that you have messy messages. So if you have messy messaging, well, they just close the connection. They just assume that will not understand what you're going to say. So do not do this. Really, never share awful slides. So always take the time to at least share clean slides with the messages you want, but not with everything on top of everything else. So never assume that your texts are clear because you understand them. You are probably, and most likely, the only person on earth who understands exactly what the text you have written means. And that's because you are very specialized. So that's normal for a scientist. So a scientist understands what she or he is doing and what she or he is writing. That's always true. The problem is that the assumption that everybody else will do it, that's just wrong. So never write incomprehensible texts. Check your text, make it simple, make it short, make it really essential, because otherwise the others will not understand. And avoid arrogance. So avoid being the one who knows everything and you don't care about what the others understand. So you write the article because you have carried out a research and the point is just publishing the article, or being invited to a conference. That's the end of your job. You have been invited to a conference. The others need to understand what you're saying. No, that's never true. This is arrogance. And we, the scientists, really have to deal with this concept of really showing arrogance when we talk, when we speak, when we deliver the messages. Because we know that we know. So we feel like, okay, that's the end of what I need to do. No, you need to communicate. You need to share what you know. Otherwise, you are in your ivory tower and nobody else will connect with you. So never, never show arrogance. This is an example that I took from a presentation that was made on Monday. So it's very recent. This is the typical slide that you can see.
And Antonella, may I say, tell them why Monday was special, because a lot of them don't know.
Monday was the 10th anniversary of the discovery of the Higgs boson. And so 10 years on since the discovery of the Higgs boson, a very important celebration at CERN. And yeah, the presentations took place in the main auditorium, and there was the CERN audience. And yeah, and someone, well, a lot of people made the assumption that because they were among peers, they could just present in the wrong way. So this is a typical slide, which I would call awful slide, because there are, you know, several colors, boxes, text written as, you know, a list, and here and there, and all the graphs that, of course, the scientists understand what they mean. Of course she does, or he does. But what do you, what is your reaction? No one would consider this a nice slide. Now, of course, we as participants, as members of the audience, we do make an effort because we're motivated. We want to understand what the scientist is saying. So we try our best. But this is the same as, you know, putting a huge barrier. So someone will try to overcome, and we will still be connected with you. This is always true. But clearly, the scientist presenting this slide and going ahead is not using her or his empathy, because otherwise she or he would see the eyes of the other people being okay, yeah, okay, you know. So this is a very clear example. Now I have a couple of suggestions for you. These are the 3 C's in communication. So actually, if you add communication, you have 4. Anyway, you need to take care of your content. This is totally up to you. So there is no one who can tell you what is the best content among all the information that you have in your brain that you need to deliver to the public that you are talking to. So you are the only person knowing that. But ask yourself, always ask yourself, the moment that you're preparing a presentation for any public, start by asking yourself, among all the things that I know and that I want to share, which ones are adapted to this particular context? So there is no one who can tell you this, but you have to make the effort and you have to do the exercise. Then clarity. Clarity, someone does know how to sound very clear, how to be clear, how to deliver clearly the content that they have. It happens, but it's very rare. We train. A communicator trains a lot, and that makes sense. It's an important part of your job. It's an important thing that we're doing. So train. You can also do it. I mean, there is a lot of communication training on the internet. So just choose the ones that you like, that are kind of close to your nature and close to what you would like to do. So start by doing this and observe and copy. Things that work, you can copy them and just do it, and record yourself in front of a screen and see if you get the messages across in a clear way. You are the first judge. You should understand it really clearly because you have the content, but be critical. don't be nice to yourself. Be critical. Just start by saying, I don't like me. I don't like what I'm doing. I have to improve. And then you train and you train and you train. And then there is the third C, which is charisma. That is the most difficult thing to build. And that's something that really is difficult to learn. But it's so important because, I guess that this is known, but then we can discuss this, of course. When you deliver a message, 2% is what you deliver. So 2% is content. 98% has nothing to do with the content. So 98% is the way you move. It's how close you get to having an eye contact with the people you have in front of you. 98%. So you could say, whatever. But if you say it well, people will follow you. And we see this in politics. I'm sorry, but we do see this. We see politicians saying stupid things, and yet a lot of people following them. Why? Because they do it in the right way. And what they say doesn't matter really doesn't matter. Only 2%. And to focus on this 2%, you have to be very careful. And after 2 minutes, no one will follow you. So I have lost you since how long? 20 minutes now. So you're now following me since 20 minutes. I know that, right? Okay. Now the golden rule, make it relevant. Whatever you do, you have to make it relevant. It doesn't matter what you do. To the most of your public, it really doesn't matter. And the more you specialize in something, the less close you are to be relevant to the people you're talking to. So your only chance to get people engaged and connected with you is to make it relevant to them. And remember that I'm speaking also about your peers. In your life as a scientist, you deal with a lot of different colleagues. Well, I don't know how many of you really talk with your colleagues about what you are doing. This doesn't happen. Usually it happens during the conferences, and there you have hundreds of people in front of you and perhaps only one person who knows exactly what you're doing, and you want to communicate to all of them. So make it relevant. Don't make the assumption that what you do is relevant to everybody. It is not. So just be, a normal person making an effort to share what you're doing with anyone. That's the right attitude. Okay, since I'm done, Manjit, I think we wanted to give the floor to the questions, and I think that we can start the discussion now.
So thank you, Antonella, very much. So to all of our course participants, this particular lecture, and actually all of the course this week, is for your benefit. So now, since you're learning wonderful science all week, we want you to be able to share that when you go back with whoever you want, as Antonella said. So now is your chance to ask any question you want from her as to how to improve relevance and have impact. So please, Cameron, I see your hand up already. Go ahead.
Hiya. Thanks for the talk. That was really interesting and very clear. Thank you very much. So question I have, something you touched upon before, was about sort of having Zoom presentations, which is obviously very relevant now. So you mentioned your sort of main points for clarity and doing a good presentation, which I'm sure applies over Zoom as well. But would you say there are any sort of additional pitfalls that you can fall into on Zoom, which you may not in a real life presentation, and ways to sort of make a Zoom presentation more engaging to sort of counteract the fact that, yes, we can't, sort of personal interaction is a little bit more difficult. And it's sometimes harder to sort of get across a sort of charisma when it's a virtual presentation.
Yeah, indeed. So it's more challenging, but the way you speak, for example, so you Cameron, the way you speak tells me that, for example, you already have the right voice. So when I hear your voice, or the right microphone, for example, but the combination of the two things really works. And this is already, you remember, 98% is not the content. Also on Zoom, that doesn't change. So it's a constant thing. So having a good voice, having a voice that sounds really clear. For example, when you speak, the only thing I would tell you is, because you have a very strong British accent, of course, Scottish, I don't know, something.
Yes, you're correct.
Scottish, okay. So, for example, for an international audience, just speed a little bit, reduce your speed, because we international people like to understand what you're saying. So, of course, because you are a native speaker, that doesn't come very natural to you. Of course, that's normal. But perhaps the only effort I would say for you on Zoom, now that you have spoken, is just reduce the speed, but that's fine. And you know what we do? Well, actually, the Italians do it naturally as well. They move the ends, they move the hands, and they move the position, because the moment that I do something, or I open my eyes, or I tell you something like this, you then say, oh, she's saying something. And I go from, you know, the attention of people starts very high, actually, then it increases for a while, then it drops. And then I need to do something. I need to call you back. I need to attract your attention, and then I can get this going up again. It will go down again, I know that, but then I will do something else. And it's like this. So you seem to be really quite already have some very good and positive points. Also, the other thing is that you're very close to the camera. So by being very close, you can use your smile. You are smiling, that works, and do it. And just then the content that you will have to prepare nice slides, of course, that's always true. Use videos if you can, but I know that the challenge is, you know, we know them, but very little suggestions can make a huge difference.
Thank you. So next, Rita, please.
Yeah, I can, but yeah, not very.
We don't hear you, Rita.
I could hear something.
Yeah, now?
Yeah.
Yes,
Better.
perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for the presentation. I would just like to ask if you have any tips regarding the posters presentations, because this is, I feel, the most difficult, only to express myself, but also to try to show something that is not boring or overfull in the poster.
Yeah, the posters are the less, I would say, least effective communication means that I know of. And there is nothing you can do, basically. Posters are just wrong. We shouldn't do poster sessions in general, because people don't read the posters. Very few do it. What works during poster sessions is the contact with the scientist who did something. I would never do an A0 poster. That really doesn't work. And I've been in exhibitions for now 5 years, and I find that exhibitions are really one of the most difficult communication outlet that you can think of, because you always, if you want to do a nice exhibition, you always have, 100 words to say something, I don't know, about the Higgs boson, or in your case, I don't know, about something. So that's a poster that can work, that is likely, has chances to work. Big picture, something that attracts the public, and then 100 words. Now, you're not in this case, of course, because you're a scientist, and with the poster becomes a replacement for a presentation. So you have really no means. And the only thing I think that you can do is you talking. So you being proactive, you using perhaps even if you don't write anything on your poster and you have only one graph or two graphs or whatever, you have the knowledge. So you will become the person who communicates to the others your content. And then give them, I don't know, some material. Just, if you have prepared, I don't know, 6 slides or something like this, you talk to them, you communicate what you're doing, and then you give them the 6 slides, because then they will have the time to look at to your slides and understand what you have said. And but it's a very poor communication tool, very poor, very poor.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's why I always have this difficulty of trying to present it without being boring.
Yeah, so we can make efforts, but not miracles.
Yeah. So thank you, Antonella. One of the challenges a lot of our young people have who are participating in this course is that often they're only ever given posters because they don't get oral presentations. And as you said, it's one of the most challenging medium to try, to communicate with. So any hints you can give? So your idea is to only use 1 or 2 things and large letters and then be present.
If you are given only a poster as a way to communicate, you basically, as I said, have a very poor thing in your hands. So I would just suggest to become the communication medium yourself and to say, okay, I do not have a proper medium to communicate with you, but I will do this. So you, the scientist, become really the communicator, and you have the key graphs on your that you really can use to show what you have done in your poster, and then you give just a few slides to the person, and you prepare these copies, and the person can then come back to you and ask you questions.
Thank you. So next, Shani, did I get that right? Is that Shani?
Shani, yes.
Okay, please go ahead.
So my question is a bit embarrassing, to be honest. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay.
Better now. Yeah.
So I would actually like to know if you have any advice regarding when one tends to ramble a bit, or you kind of just overspeak when you do the scientific section of your talk, because I get a lot of advice regarding cleaning up slides, making sure that the content is okay, and you have enough detail also to communicate but not overwhelm your crowd. But I think there are times when you get a bit excited explaining the science and you just over explain. So do you perhaps have some advice to just, almost like an anchoring point to just bring you back to center so that you don't say too many things or over explain too much detail?
Okay, there is no general rule for that. Over-explaining is something that you define with respect to the public that you are talking to. So, for example, you're saying too many details, you're sharing too many details with that specific public that doesn't need to know all these details. And by the way, doesn't even understand the relevance of such details. So this is actually what we said at the beginning, when you select the content that you want to share, that's the first step. So this is something that only you can do, because I, as a communicator, for example, I can tell you what is not really relevant to me, what doesn't ring a bell, what doesn't spark my interest, but I'm not necessarily, your audience. So you have to evaluate what your audience is likely to expect from you, and don't do more than that. So you actually, by defining the issue, by defining the problem, you show that you are very well aware of this. So you will probably not be the person who makes this mistake, because you're aware of that. So by seeking for advice, it means that, again, you are aware. So I bet that you personally will not make this mistake. But always there is no general advice that I can give you. Now, the other point perhaps is the timing. So if you are given 15 minutes, you have to stick to 15 minutes. Because this is a sign of respect to everybody else. And also because remember, after 2 minutes, no one will follow you anyway. So, you know, don't use more. It's just a waste of your personal time and the time of other people. So, but that's not the only, you know, measure that you have in your hands. So 15 minutes is quite a lot of time anyway.
So thank you, Antonella, for that. And I want to make a comment to all our budding future leaders. Scientists never seem to respect time. And it's not your time to respect, it's their time. So if you're given the time, please respect it, because they will respect you as well. It's a mutual respect. And if you cannot put your messages in the 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever, it means you've got too many messages. So you need to focus. Sorry, Antonella, but just to say, we scientists are notorious for overrunning. So it's really important to be able to do that. So Corey, please go ahead.
Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Sorry, Shame,
course.
can I tell you something more?
Sure.
If you don't mind, if you don't mind. Since we were talking about Zoom presentations, so for example, in your case, it doesn't matter now. I'm not making a comment, but in general, is that as an example for future presentations in Zoom, check the light. In your case, your camera gets a lot of light on the background. That doesn't allow me to see your face, so you're not talking to me. And it doesn't matter if you're doing this now. I'm not saying anything here. But if you are the speaker, please pay attention to these details, because as a participant in this conference, the only thing I will remember is not what you will tell me about your research that has taken years to you to get to a result or whatever. I will remember the very, very intense light that is behind your face. So it's sad, but that's the thing that happens. Just, okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Corey, please go ahead. We don't hear you though.
We can't hear you. Perhaps so while you feel, oh yeah.
So I was going to say, while you are fixing your sound, perhaps
now, but now can you speak? Perhaps so we can. I thought we could hear him. Okay, never mind. Okay.
So Corey, we'll come back to you. We'll let Christoph's, please.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. I guess my question is more related to knowing your audience. That's just some tips from you if we're sort of changing our audience from more like scientific based to, I don't know, when you have to talk to, I don't know, press or like some just to give some information, I don't know, at university to like get the students interested in everything, sort of like, and you have to avoid, not the avoid, but a bit move away from the scientific way of things. What would be your recommendations to change in our talks and everything?
Yeah, so this is about training. So this is what the communication courses do. They show you how to understand your audience and how to what to do to get them engaged. So of course now it's an hour of time. We cannot really so my presentation was just titles. You have seen this. So of course each title is 3 days of training, 4 days of training, or whatever. But in your case, so for example, from day one, so after this presentation, you decide, you say, okay, now I've decided I will do everything, keeping in mind the fact that I really need to communicate what I'm doing in the right way. Okay, so what shall I do? Exactly what you did. So wonder and make yourself aware of the public is the first thing. So ask who is your public, ask the organizers, ask really, you know, understand what your public will be. And this is something that you can do. You know, sometimes when I'm asked to do a presentation, I go as far as looking at the different people in LinkedIn, because I need to understand what is their context, because how do I make this relevant otherwise? I need to understand what they are looking for. I have several messages to give, that's not a problem, but I need to select the messages that work for them. So I go as far as looking on LinkedIn and search for their profiles, because that's the first way, the way I have. When Manjit asked me to do this presentation, I said, I searched and made a research on as much as I could to understand who you would be. So even, for example, to understand the kind of language that I would have ahead, because otherwise, I mean, this is not a communication course. In 1 hour, I'm very well aware that it's just inspiring. The scope that I can have is to motivate you to go further. I cannot teach you anything, but that's what you can do, exactly what you did. Making yourself aware of the public is the first step. There are several means now. We're lucky, we live in 2022, so the social media don't hide anything. You can find out everything you need. Go for it, and then of course adapt to the content, and that's something that I don't think that I know of any communication course that can teach you this.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Christoph, for your question. Thanks, Antonella, for your answer, because I think one of the things scientists often do is we give the same slides and we forget who we're talking to. So it's really important to know who you're talking to. Corey, let's see if you can have audio now, please.
That's
Still
I think it's your microphone. I really think it's your microphone.
Okay,
why don't you? Oh, okay.
So we go to Habiba and we wait. I don't want to embarrass him by. So Habiba, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you for a very interesting talk. I had a question regarding questions that you might get after communicated your project or something. So my question would be how to deal with them, answer them in the right way, and more specifically, the tricky questions, the ones that you don't really have a proper answer, the ones that would off balance you. How do you deal with those and to answer them properly if you can, and to not seem like you don't know in front of an audience?
Yeah, okay. So for example, you have asked me a question, okay? So first of all, if you are if the question is not clear, that's not the case of your question, so I can't really make this example with you, but in case you do not understand the question, you can certainly ask it again. And what I was saying, empathy is also making a connection with your public. So the person who asked you the person who asked you the question actually is very likely to know that his or her question wasn't clear. So don't be afraid. Just ask the question, ask the person again. And in that way, you also repeat the question to the others, because the others are very likely also to not having understood what the question was. That's very normal. That's very, very, very common. So repeating the question is often a very good idea, because sometimes the microphones don't work, or you understand the questions, but the public around didn't, and stuff like this. So I advise you to always repeat the question, first of all, whatever the answer is. Now, this gives you also the time to think, because it is very likely that actually you know the answer, only you didn't take the time, you couldn't take the time to think about it. So take the time, you repeat the question in this, by doing this, your brain focuses on the answer, and you might know the answer then, or you might find a way to reply honestly. Like, okay, if you really don't know the answer, to be honest, in your case, you're a scientist, so it is very likely that if you do not know the answer probably doesn't really exist, or perhaps is outside your specializing domain or whatever. That's not a problem. Okay, this is never a problem. You can be honest and you say, look, no, you shouldn't say look. Sorry. But you can very honestly say the point that you raise. Oh, first of all, sorry, never say, oh, that's a very interesting question, because that puts all the others in a very bad situation. It's a challenge then to be as interesting as the person that you just identify as the most interesting requester. So never say this. But you can say the point that you raise is an interesting point that I will, if really is interesting, you can say that I will look into. And also you can say, I have looked into that and I found out that, if you haven't, you say, well, it's interesting. If it's not interesting, say it. So you say, the point you raise is probably a good point, but my interest, of course, you have to word this perhaps in a more appropriate way, but point out that this is beyond what you want to talk about.
Okay.
This is your 15 minutes. In a way, that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of questions, repeat them. That gives the time to focus, and then you decide what to say. Okay. You are the scientist.
Great,
Thank you, Antonella. I also wanted to point out two things just because of years of experience. Sometimes asking to repeat the question buys you time to think about it, as Antonella has said. The second thing is, please do not try to make up the answer, because if you don't know, find a good way of saying you don't know, or you haven't thought about it, you think about it, you look into it. Because if you make things up on the spot, there are lots of people in the audience, you've lost credibility as a scientist. Sorry, that's my, sorry, it's not about communication, it's just being very clear. So sorry, Antonella, just saying that. So Corey, are you able to do this, or shall we read your question?
We can read the question.
Okay, so Corey's saying he works in a theoretical field. Often a core part of the presentation is some new mathematical derivation of graph of calculations. We know about these things, I guess. However, often I think you lose the audience as soon as they see a big equation or a bunch of graphs. Do you have any advice for making slides that help to not scare off an audience in a theoretical context?
Yes, I actually do have it, because if you have theoretical talks, again, you have to be aware of your audience. So if you're talking to peers like equations, okay, they are like you. So don't be afraid of showing equations with peers. So that's not a problem for them. Of course, again, you deal in your daily life as a scientist, you deal with, I make up a number, 15 different types of equations, just to say graphs or whatever. Okay, well, again, be aware of your public, be aware of the context, select the content. So instead of, sharing a 15 objects, let me call this way, there will be some that are really relevant. Others are not. So just don't include them. And this is really up to you. Now, of course, if you are with journalists or if you are with the general public, you really should avoid equations. And that's very sad. That is really sad, because that's what you need to explain something. Well, there is no way. If you put an equation on your Zoom screen, for example, as you said, you will lose the audience. So there is no point. So once again, you are showing that you are aware. So it's good because it tells me that you have a built-in empathy because you are already aware of the issues. So when you say the moment you show an equation, you lose your audience, so don't do it. You have to find a different way.
If I may say something on that,
no, sorry, Jutta, there are students up online first, please. Because this is really for them to be able to communicate. We already do. We have somebody called Rua up there, please.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I really appreciate having a science communicator giving us a talk. I think the information you're providing is super valuable. My question is, so I'm working on a project that explains radiation therapy to cancer patients ages 5 to 19. The problem is I don't think I'm a very good communicator, but I find an issue in the project that it's targeting a very large age group. So from 5 to 19, you communicate differently to those age groups and different ideas interest them. I also would like to target the families of those children. So it's, I think, not very, I feel like I would face a problem, and I don't want to wait until I can test my product with the children and get their feedback to know what the problem in communication is. So would you have any advice for me on how I can formulate the communication to reach the audience from different ages in a good manner? Thank you.
So you have a very difficult job, of course. The fact that because you have to communicate in a very challenging context, okay? So your job is about communicating something in a way very dry to someone suffering and to someone really going through very challenging experiences. So yeah, so your job is difficult, but once again, you just showed this. You are aware of the challenge. That's the first step. What you are saying is totally right. So if you say from 5 to 19, you are identifying very different age groups and very different communication types. So don't do it. Again, it's like with the formula and stuff like this. You have identified the problem because the problem exists. So you are right. Don't use the same communication tools that you can think of for the 5 years old and the 19 years old, because this will not work. So you are right. So train yourself for the different age groups. I would suggest that you can think that the 5 years old, the 6 years old, the 7 years old can be regrouped in the same age group, and use the same communication tools that work for this public in other contexts. So what do they use? What really works with them in other contexts, like cartoons? Do they work? Virtual reality, does this work? If yes, use it. You are going to talk about radiation. That doesn't matter. That is 2%, remember, okay? But think of the right communication tool. So I would say cartoons, virtual reality, games, that works, okay? You can be the character of a game if you feel like doing it. So you do not need heavy programming or stuff like this. You can be the one. But yes, you cannot be a cartoon character for a 19 years old person. No, that doesn't work. So you have to change. So 5 to 7, I would say, is the same age group. Now, 8 already starts to change. So then 8, I would say, 8 to 10, 8 to 11. Okay, for those people, try to identify what works. And I believe that a good example is stories. Stories start to work for this age group. So narrative, you have to tell a story. Now, virtual reality can work, but only for, you know, a shorter amount of time. So gaming in this context, because they start to be really aware of the, you know, bad news. So that probably doesn't work. So stories. And then teenagers, it changes again. And then 16 to 19, you have to tell the true story, and you have to appear as a scientist who knows what she is doing. Just be very, I would say, in that case, structured. Because by you being structured, they assume that what they are going to go through is something that you know, and they will feel reassured. So yes, these are very different age groups. You have to use different tools.
So thank you, Antonella. I'm really sorry we have to now stop after such a wonderful, interesting discussion. We could have carried on this for a long time. So I would like to just take a quick moment to thank you and also take a photograph. Please put your cameras on, so then I can welcome the next speakers.